Well, good evening, everybody. You'll learn very quickly about me. I'm extremely informal, and it's a small enough group that will work through the slides. But if you have questions, just go ahead and pop up a hand and ask. I would much rather we repeat the same things over and over and over again just to help it get in your head, because ultimately, really, rabies is pretty straightforward. I know it doesn't seem that way necessarily, but this is a good portion of what I do, talking with either physicians, with nurses calling for their physicians from the ED, or talking to bite victims, which I do a lot, which is very entertaining and takes a lot of patience, so God bless all of you that take care of them. To keep this a little more interactive as well, who all in here's got a smartphone or thing that they can text on? Okay, so if you take just a sec, and we're going to do this. It's a thing called Poll Everywhere. So every once in a while, I'm going to throw up a question. And then you get to text your answer in, and the answers will populate automatically, and we can talk about everybody's answer. So to be able to do that, you got to set it up, right? So the easiest one is from a text message. So go to your texts. If you want to, you don't have to, but it would be fun. From a text message, and where the phone number is that you would normally put in, or mom's name or husband's name, whatever, put 22333. So that's the phone number that you're texting it to. And then when you get that far, what you're texting to that number, the message is Melissa over 037. We've been playing with this all day at work because it's just fun. So once you get that set up, hit send, you'll get a text back that says you've joined the conversation, the polling, and then we'll have a test question for everybody to try it out on. You won't get spam. They won't send you bizarro texts in the middle of the night. Okay. Okay. So this one I answered earlier myself. And I gave myself away because then I couldn't figure out how to clear it from this place. So the answer that you're going to send in is just one letter, A, B, C, D, or E. So again, this is just playing with the thing. So how many animals, excluding two-legged family, live on your personal property? There, haha, see, isn't this fun? This is just the silly one. So you can answer multiple times if you want. If you want to shake it up and be wild and wacky. So everybody kind of get the idea, right? So there will be several of these as we go through. Now, the key thing for the presentation this evening, for us to do CME or CE, nursing CEUs for you guys, DHEC is not a approved provider. So instead, we're doing the presentation. This is basically the same information that CDC has got on one of their CME deals. And I give you instructions at the end where to sign up, how to take the test, and go ahead and get your 1 hour of CEU. And it's all free, and you get your certificate right away. So the questions that are on here, excluding this one, should look really familiar. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Okay? So basic objectives, you always have to have objectives. Understanding the epidemiology of animal rabies in South Carolina and the upstate region, specifically Pickens County. Understanding basic pathophys of rabies, and then understanding the CDC rabies post-exposure prophy vaccine series, and then indications. And answering as many questions as we can. Okay, again, this is going to be an interactive deal. So animal rabies in South Carolina. This is looking at the entire state for all of last year. Total, we had 130, let's see if I got a pointer, I do, 130 animal cases of rabies. And the winner in all of that, winner, chicken dinner, was raccoons. Across the state had 62. The other one that I'm going to point out that's the big stinker are bats. So in the United States, if we've got human cases of rabies, by far the majority of those are because of bats. So that's the entire state. If we're looking specifically at Pickens County, a little harder to see, but Pickens County got rid this past year. We had a total of 14, and again, this is animal cases of rabies in the county. Again, skunks with 9 are a winner, raccoons, domestic livestock. I should have looked that one up. Occasionally we'll have a cow that comes back positive. And then we had one bat. Now, I can't tell you exactly why all of a sudden last year Pickens County had kind of a spike in numbers, other than the basics of testing is the more you test, the more you're going to find. If you're looking for it, your numbers are going to go up. Periodically, we will have particular pockets of population that are adamant that they get animals tested regularly, so we get a lot of phone calls and then we test more animals. Okay, so here's another question. Human cases of rabies in the U.S. are most often associated with exposures to which mammal? Bats, dogs, skunks, or cats? So again, your answer is going to be A, B, C, or D. And you're only going to text in the letter. Survey says. Survey says it's not going to play. So this is.
Vote on any more in this poll.
Oh, see, well that's it. I broke it. Okay, well, so verbally, what do you guys think the answer is?
Cat.
So I heard cats. I heard bats. So, right, bats. Human cases of rabies in the U.S. are usually because an individual has an unknown exposure to a bat or an exposure and they don't seek care. So this one's going to be A, bats. Cats, I have heard here very recently in Pickens County, just need to go away. But on our previous with the slide, we didn't even have any positive cats identified in the county last year. So these are the two primary documents that I'm going to be pulling off of, and Lori's wonderful in her packet here. The 2008 one is already in here. Is the 2010 one too? It is. She's got both of them in there for you, the whole stinking thing, which I wasn't going to do, but she's got more moolah than I do. So, so both of these documents are in there. They haven't changed. They're also available online as PDF if you want them. So pathophys of rabies. It's a Lissa virus in the family Rhabdoviridae. It's passed along in the saliva or neural tissue of infected mammals. So has to be a mammal. So we're not talking about snakes. We're not talking about turtles. We're simply talking about warm-blooded animals. The virus moves the wrong way up neurons. So if somebody gets bitten in the foot, it doesn't cause any symptoms at all until the virus travels along the nerves and ends up at the base of the brain. Doesn't cause any symptoms, any problems at all. Completely asymptomatic, and incubation in humans ranges from days to years. Now the issue with that is you don't have any real good studies on how quickly it moves, and it does vary depending on the individual. It's not truly consistent person to person. What I usually end up telling folks when I'm talking to them is that the virus travels about 1 centimeter to 1/2 of an inch in 24 hours, just because I like to mix up my metrics and confuse people. But a very short distance in 24 hours. For the docs, if you're kind of like me and you really want to see it in black and white, where is it? I have been hunting and looking and I can't find that one. But everybody, including non-DHEC people, use that number. So when I find it, I will offer it out to you because it's nice to have it in black and white and know where the information is coming from. So early, you've got folks that have got malaise, fever, and headache. Who doesn't have malaise, fever, and headache, especially this time of the year? So you've got somebody who's been bitten. They walk in because they've got malaise, fever, and headache, and they're hysterical because they know they got bitten yesterday and they've got rabies today. Thank God for the internet, right? And then certainly worsening issues is the progressive encephalomyelitis, and then a whole progression into coma and death. Used to be that all the information would say it is fatal. Now it's mostly fatal since there have been, I believe, between 7 or 8 individuals that have ended up being treated and survived. So the real nitty-gritty of it, right? Somebody presents with a history of an animal bite, either 2 months ago, 2 weeks ago. They woke up and there was a bat in their room. They woke up and there was a bat in the kitchen, but not in their room. They walked by a cat and it hissed at them. One of my favorites is they had a skunk spray them, and the skunk was positive. All sorts of different bizarre scenarios. So what happens next? Please remember that I'm DHEC, so I have to address some of the DHEC side of this too, okay? So with an animal incident, what do we do with these folks? And we call it an incident. We used to call it an animal bite. Exposures are not necessarily animal bites. It can be certainly a scratch on occasion, really depends on the situation. Anytime that you might have an infected animal's saliva in eyes, up the nose, and the mouth, that kind of exposure, so mucous membrane exposures. So we call them incidents. So what we're looking at is when you've got somebody walking in, here are some of the things that I would expect that you're thinking, would hope that you're thinking, and you may have some other ones as well. Reporting the animal incident to DHEC, giving us a heads up. Animal exposure assessment, trying to figure out, is there a risk, is there not a risk? Making your recommendation for or against rabies PEP, and then doing wound management and seeing about a tetanus shot, updating your tetanus. So reporting the animal incident to DHEC. If you get on our website, and I have to tell on myself, I was asking folks in Columbia for information to share with you guys for this, and they were slower than I wanted them to be. And so I said, well, fine, I'm going to get on the website. There's all sorts of great information on the website that I had no idea was there. So if you ever have questions, feel free to buzz on here too. So this is in general for the average Joe getting on here. And what we tell folks is if you have an animal bite or any kind of an animal exposure that's significant and they have a question about rabies, you need to go and be seen by your doc. Up until 2009, DHEC would provide the immunoglobulin and the vaccine for providers, and had a much bigger role in whether or not folks got PEP'd or didn't get PEP'd. At this point, I am purely a consultant. It's your treating physician's decision whether or not to PEP or not. And you guys do not have to get permission from public health to treat or not treat, which I have calls every once in a while of folks saying I have to get your permission. So from our point of view, you do not. But we refer folks to their medical providers. One thing on here that was new to me, and it may be too small even on your handout for you to read, is the second little bit here. If a child is bitten and you do not seek medical treatment for the wound, parents are required to report that to DHEC so that DHEC can ensure that the child is being appropriately cared for. It was new to me. I'm sure our general public isn't aware of that either, which is why it's interesting sometimes to get on the website. For you guys, for all of the medical providers, support staff, everybody, we've also got a very lengthy webs page with everything from how to report to how to treat, who to call to get consultation, how to order the stuff and get it in your clinic, doing titers, I mean the whole deal. So that is there and available if you need it. So in your packet, one of the single sheets that was loose is the 2016 list of reportable conditions. This is one of the other hats that I wear, is epidemiology. So we'd like to educate folks on the list of reportable conditions. Sometimes it gets a bit forgotten, but I think labs especially are pretty good at telling us when they've got certain conditions. On here I've got my two red boxes, although it's really circling three different things. One of them is if you've got an animal bite. An animal bite, a mammal bite is reportable. A suspect or confirmed case of human rabies is certainly reportable, and that's reportable within 24 hours. And then if you decide to go ahead and do rabies post-exposure prophylaxis, that also is reportable. Bunch of other fun stuff on there too, which is just interesting to know. This particular document is available on our website as a PDF. You can print out as many as you want and wallpaper the lab with them or make airplanes out of them, but whatever suits your fancy. So reporting the animal incident to DHEC. The other document that you've got is what we call a 1799 for state government, so everything has a number. This is the one that's an animal incident report, and this is the one that you probably have available, see pretty regularly. Yeah, I'm getting getting big old nods. I have even filled one of these out as the person who got bit, which was interesting coming from where I was coming from. So this form, anytime you've got somebody that's had an exposure to an animal, they should be filling this out, and it's okay to hand it to them and have them fill it out, okay? Please ask them to fill it out as completely as possible. What happens with this form, it gets faxed into our environmental health offices. The gentlemen that work in the rabies program then take this piece of paper, contact the victim, get a little more information, clarify issues, but then they go and make a site visit to wherever the victim has said that animal that bit them lives, or where they saw it last. They are required to go and make a home visit. They are required as best as they can within their power to actually lay eyes on the animal and serve the owner with a quarantine notice that says, you understand this animal is not to go anywhere for 10 days. We will return at the end of 10 days, and we have to be able to see the animal to assess whether or not it's still healthy, living, doing okay. And that's so we can inform the victim, who can work with their medical providers, as to whether or not they really need rabies vaccine. In regards to reporting PEP, if you guys are sitting in the ED or in the outpatient surgery center, and you've got somebody come in and you're having them do this report form, your provider has already said, yes, we're going to do rabies PEP. When you fax this over, it is okay to write on this as well that rabies PEP was administered. So if you go back to that pink report form, if you've got a mammal bite, that's reportable. If you initiate PEP, that's reportable. So if you have your animal bite on here, that's your report for that. If you write on the bottom of that rabies PEP was initiated, that's your report for that. So you've taken care of the two reporting elements that you need to do for DHEC. Okay? Does that make sense?
I just want to clarify.
Yes.
So in outpatient, we usually get them from the physician's office. They send the patient over home for them to come. So they fill out this form or report it from their end tonight. Do we turn around and report it? Can we get a PEP?
So the question is, and my recorder here has asked me to repeat questions. That's a very good one. Especially in the outpatient surgery center, they may get referrals from physicians' offices for PEP. So they've been assessed already. The report has been sent to DHEC. They're coming over here and seeing you guys for you to initiate PEP vaccine. Once the form has been sent once, that's good. So ideally, those docs will also get the message that it's okay for their staff or for them to write PEP initiated, that they're coming over and seeing you guys to get it started. Okay, good question. Thank you. Okay. So the fax number, and I was just sure somebody's going to go, well, what fax number do we send it to? It's right up there. So hopefully it's visible on your deal there. So the fax number is 282-4371, and that's for all of Pickens County. The phone number that if you would prefer to call and actually tell somebody we've got an animal bite, you can do that. I think that's kind of annoying. I like the fax thing myself. And then if you want to talk to somebody, talk to a physician or a medical consultant about the situation and assess whether or not rabies PEP, yes or no, then there is this wonderful phone number right here. Thankfully, that is not my direct line, but the gal who answers that phone can hunt me down 24/7, 365. So, and if you call that one, unless I'm on leave and out of the state, you're going to end up talking with me. The nights, weekends, holidays, for better, for worse, this is an answering service. And they will do the same thing as the gal at this other number as well. If you've got a question about PEP, and it's in the evening, 10 o'clock at night, somebody got bitten, they come in screaming and yelling, you can call that number and they'll hook you up with a provider that will talk through rabies PEP. Yes, ma'am.
So, let's say a person lives in Anderson County, which is not that far from here, which is in Pickens County for DCR. That's going to be, is that going to be in Anderson County occurrence number that they're going to call instead of Pickens?
So the question is, if an Anderson County resident comes to Pickens County for treatment, do you use the Anderson number or the Pickens number? I say, you guys are in Pickens, you use the Pickens number. Leave it on the folks at DHEC to shuffle paper and do assignments and let them figure it out. okay? That way, partly too, you get to know potentially the folks at the other end of the line too. So you know if you call to report it, you're going to be talking to Shannon or Brian, something of that nature, so you can build a relationship. Anderson or Pickens, doesn't matter, you'll end up with me, so for the medical consultant. Okay, so then this is the fun part to me because I'm not sitting in front of the patient, but it's always, tell me the story. Providers call me and go, so it's a 36-year-old got bit by a cat, do we give him PEP or not give him PEP? I'm like, you gotta tell me more, you gotta tell me the story, turn it into a little video so that I can see it in my head. So certainly wanting to know the species and availability of the animal. Species and the epidemiology piece that we talked about before, you know that we've not had any rabid cats in Pickens County for this past year, potentially prior years. You know that a snake is not a mammal, so they're not even eligible, fortunately for them, to get sick with rabies. So if somebody walks in and says, I was bitten by a cat, you know, the suspicion goes down a little lower. The risk is not as much. Type of exposure, a bite versus a non-bite. A bite is certainly worse than a scratch, going back to how rabies virus works. So it's spread by saliva, or in saliva, of a sick animal. So a non-bite, a cat scratches you. Again, low risk, it's, you know. Circumstance of exposure, provoked or unprovoked. The most common one I hear is I was riding my bike or I was running and I ran by a yard and the two dogs in the yard came after me and bit my legs and I hit them and then they took off and they're gone again. Is it a provoked bite or an unprovoked bite? That's a provoked bite. Yes. Running by a dog, dogs they chase cars, they chase bikes. So if you've got dogs or animals around, think about what's normal for them and how they react. So provoked versus unprovoked. If it's provoked, again, the risk goes down. If it's unprovoked, you're sitting on your front porch, and I've had this one happen too, you're sitting on the front porch, and a dog or a cat comes out of the woods, comes up on and chases you into your front door kind of thing, and got a good hold of it. That's unprovoked. That nobody bothered that dog, he came up and got you.
Thank you.
Yes. And then how long ago was the exposure? So big thing with exposure time, and we've heard a little bit about this and we'll do it again, is 10 days. So if that animal is available to be watched and quarantined, if it's a domestic cat or a domestic dog, 10 days always works. From the date that that individual was bitten or exposed, if it's available, still healthy, happy, alive, wagging its tail and eating and drinking on day 10, that person does not need rabies shots. Does not need rabies shots. Doesn't matter if you send it for testing, doesn't matter if it goes on to get sick 5 days after that. What the science says is they could not have been exposed, okay? So those are all of the pieces that you're trying to put together into the story to help you put together whether or not this is a high risk or low risk, and you're gonna do rabies PEP. Okay, so straight out of our MMWR. Everybody still okay? Need extra cookies? Drinks? No? Okay, you're still okay. Okay. So looking again at the types of animals. Dogs, cats, and ferrets. If they're healthy and available for 10 days of observation, you don't touch them. Don't worry about them. Leave them alone. If that animal at day 5, DHEC gets a call from the owner, and the owner says, hey, so my dog passed over dead, started having seizures, and is now dead, then DHEC is required, which has happened, DHEC is required to let the victim know the animal is deceased now, got sick, has had issues, you need to go and be seen by your doctor again. So we do all of our communication with the victim, okay? So if the animal comes up 5 days into it, gets sick, then they come back and then you go ahead and treat them, okay? Rabid or suspected rabid, so your suspicion is high, then go for it, immediately begin giving them the meds, okay? And I'll have a little graph here in a minute that helps. If it's unknown, which is another popular one that we get, so it was the neighborhood feral cat that will eat every once in a while out of somebody's hand, and my kid went out and tried to pet it and then got bit by the cat. But now nobody knows where the cat is because we screamed at it and it took off. What do you do then? Well, this says, give me a call. But your providers can kind of work through those too, but I'm always available. Skunks, raccoons, foxes, bats, any of the wild and crazies, unless they're available to be tested, and that means he went out, shot the thing, not in the head, hopefully. They always shoot them in the head, though. Always shoot them in the head. Killed the thing, and it's still available. Not that it's shot in the head, it's been buried for 3 days in 93-degree heat, which that one we get a lot, too. If we can send the head, I didn't think about the food, but if we can send the head for testing, then you can wait. And the testing we usually have back within 24 hours, so it's a pretty quick turnaround. If you don't have it available, or we had a bat in the bathroom, so we let the bat outside, but down there's 16 bats outside. I'll bet one of them is that bat. No, just go ahead and treat them. And then looking at livestock, small rodents like rabbits, woodchucks, beavers. It's just fun to say woodchucks. For those, for the most part, don't worry about, especially if we're looking at that map with the numbers of the critters that we had. I will say we've had a couple squirrels in other counties that came back positive, which the stories of a rabid squirrel are just downright funny. Well, shouldn't be, but they are because they're such aggressive little buggers. So all this one is saying basically is if you have an animal to test, then wait on doing any rabies prophylaxis unless it's obvious that this is super bizarre and it's probably going to be rabies. And then you can go ahead and start. But if you've got a specimen for testing, and that'll be coordinated between DHEC, a veterinarian, and the victim. You guys don't play a role in that part at all, okay? We can get it down, get it tested at BOL, and as I mentioned, it's decapitating I didn't say that. It's sacrificing the animal, decapitating it, and then doing a direct fluorescent antibody or a DFA on brain tissue. So, what you got?
If a wild skunk or raccoon something gets in with your pet,
Yeah.
do you still you would quarantine them the same way? I mean, the same length of time. Your pet.
And you don't. So the question was, if you have a wild rabid animal get in with your pets or livestock, etc., how do you quarantine those animals? Give the environmentalists at DHEC a call, and they can work out with our state veterinarian how long they need to be quarantined. Some of them, it can be a 6-month quarantine, and that's on your property, and they have to be completely excluded from all other animals. You only go into feed and water, that kind of thing. So it can be a bit extreme depending on how you live with your animals. But the veterinarian can help everybody work through those. That's a good question. Okay. Oh, we got another question.
I'm going to pretend to be a patient here for a second. So what if DHEC doesn't call me? I don't have my rights.
DHEC, of all the things that DHEC does, this one we actually do pretty well and pretty consistently, because we are mandated by legislation to contact everybody and then to go and serve a quarantine notice. So if they have a problem, and I get this quite a bit too, that they were seen by their provider that morning, the form went in, I know they sent them the form, and now it's 10:32 and nobody has called me yet, and then I end up talking to them. And I go, that's fine, I'll call environmental, make sure that everybody's got everything. I'm very used to dealing with the hysterical people.
But if you can't get them by phone, they send somebody to find them.
Yes.
Because we have people that have prepaid phones that often are not connected.
Yeah. And if they can't get a hold of the victim, then they will default to the information on that form and look for the animal and then do their best to contact the victim. Good question. I don't remember if I repeated that one or not.
It's okay.
Okay, that one's okay. He said it's okay. Okay, so another question.
I had a patient tell me meth neutralizes rabies.
Only in Pickens County does meth neutralize rabies.
Pickens County Slim Fast. Like a charm.
I like it. It's creative. I like it. Okay, so which method is considered the standard for diagnosing rabies in either animals or humans?
B?
D.
No, yeah, D or D.
Do dog or bat for me. So this one, do you remember which kind of tissue we used? Brain. Yep. Brain tissue. Brain. So DFA on brain tissue. And quite frankly, that's with any mammal. So if we end up with a human that's got human rabies, that's one of the same tests that they do. Yes, ma'am.
Where does the rabies vaccine that dogs get and all? When you have your dog, you know, vaccinated. for
Uh-huh.
rabies. I mean, if it's had that, you just not worry about it?
Okay, so the question is if you're, and clarify for me if I'm wrong.
You have your dog that lives
Right.
with you and it's had all its shots.
Right.
Including a rabies.
So a fully immunized dog,
Right.
do you worry about it getting rabies or not getting rabies?
shot.
So if your animal that's fully vaccinated is attacked by a raccoon, we kill the raccoon, send it for testing, because we will do testing for animal exposures, not just human exposures too, okay? So raccoon attacks your dog, gets him all messed up, you kill the raccoon, we send the raccoon for testing, raccoon is positive. So ultimately what it ends up being, I believe, and the environmentalists and the vet would be better at this than I am because I do people, is a booster vaccine for the dog and then a quarantine for a period of time, but it's usually a short quarantine.
So if you're bit by a dog that has had a rabies vaccine, do you even question testing?
I still want to know what the situation is. That usually no. Usually that drops your risk very significantly, but I still like to know what the story is. Partly because one day I'm going to write a book. Okay, so DFA on brain tissue, right? Here's another one. Which of the following statements about dogs is false? And just for snots and giggles, somebody try doing the poll thingy again and texting one, just to see if it works. It's still not working well. Okay. So, dogs is false. First one, worldwide, the majority of human rabies cases are associated with dog bites. True or false? False, right. PEP should be administered immediately to anyone bitten by a dog. False. Awesome. Persons bitten by dogs that are alive 10 days after the incident are unlikely to have been exposed to the rabies virus. True. Awesome. In the U.S., dogs generally acquire rabies through exposure to infected wildlife. There's a false to that somehow. No. Yeah, that's true. I'm talking myself out of things. So you guys picked the right one. So C is false. So that would have been the answer, right? So if they're... PEP should be administered. There you go. See, I'm telling y'all that you're going to go and do this little quiz on and get your CME, so I better give you the right answer, right? And this is just because I'm talking myself out of things, that's all. And they get even better than this. So the answer is C. Persons bitten by dogs that are alive. Is false. B. No, you're right. B. B. Should be administered immediately to anyone bitten by a dog, right? No. Because you're going to do the 10-day quarantine. Right? So B. Now that I've thoroughly confused everybody. No, what did we say? Worldwide majority of... But this is worldwide instead of the United States. That's the tricky part. That's the tricky part. That's the tricky part. Okay. Phew. So the biologics, and this is the part that you guys probably see the most. So, and this again is out of the 2008 MMWR. And our friend over here, Miss Lori, is the HyperRab Telecris, but Grifols purchased Telecris. So it's still out there, still available, still used the same way, but it's just got a different manufacturer name now. So we've got everybody on here. So usually these, I hear folks using Rabivert and then the HyperRab, sometimes the Imagam. So we went from folks needing 5 doses of vaccine to only needing 4 doses of vaccine. And that's what this funny little graph is, if you get really curious about it. So this is somebody is bitten back here, and then they've got virus in their system, right? And they have given doses of vaccine and rig on day 0 for the rig and vaccine, and then 3 is vaccine, 7 vaccine, and 14 vaccine. And right now that's what is recommended for healthy individuals. So our virus present is the dash with the one polka dot. The H rig, as soon as you give it, you've got passive immunity, so that helps cover there, right? By the time you get to the 3rd dose of vaccine, you've got your virus neutralizing antibodies that are popping up. And so they will cover any virus that's floating around in the body. So that 28 dose on day 28 really wasn't gaining much of anything, which is the biggest reason why they popped it out. So for individuals not previously vaccinated, they have never seen anything with rabies before, never been bitten, nothing. Then they're going to get both the rig on day 0, and day 0 is just simply whatever day you start the vaccine. Has nothing to do with the exposure. So day 0, they're going to get their H rig, and then they're going to get the first dose of their vaccine, okay? And then vaccine is on day 0, 3, 7, 14. It just becomes a little mantra in your brain. If they have been vaccinated before, H rig is a once-in-a-lifetime deal. So if you have put that poor little boy through all those shots, infiltrating around that wound, he will never have to do that again. Okay? So I tell folks it will be horrible that first time, and then that's the only time that you ever have to do it for this particular situation. So if they've been previously vaccinated, no rig, and they're only getting 2 doses of the vaccine on day 0 and 3, and then they're all done. It's just a booster. Okay? Deltoid is the only acceptable site of vaccine for adults and older kids. So it always goes in a shoulder. Pick a shoulder, any shoulder. Depends on where you're putting your H rig. If your H rig is going into the right hand, then the vaccine needs to go in a deltoid as far away from it as possible. So it would go in the opposite shoulder. Okay? And this is the fun one that we might have interesting conversation about. This, I think, is one reason why Sherry and I got to chatting one day. I hear very frequently that if you haven't given the rig within 3 days, or it's a very short time period, that you can't give it at all. Or from the date of exposure to when you give the rig, there's a time limit there. By CDC and MMWR, there is not a time limit. If the individual got bitten 2 months ago, and they walk in and say, I had an exposure, and you talk and get the story, and it's a high-risk story, you can still, at that point, give them H-rig, if they've never been vaccinated before, give them the passive immunity, H-rig, and start them on the vaccine, just like you normally would. There's no limitation to how long from date of exposure until you start that series, as long as the individual is not demonstrating signs and symptoms of rabies, which we hope they never do. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, is there, because we had a patient came in that got bit on the nose,
Mm-hmm.
which was bizarre, trying to put all that stuff in the nose.
Yeah.
Is there some place that is, that you're not, like if it's near the eye, or if it's near, I don't know, a penis, or something weird, is there some place you shouldn't put the medicine directly on the body?
That not as no. From our point of view, no. It's you go to the site, to the exposure, put it all in. No, split it up. Get
It was really, really hard.
right. You get as much in there as you can reasonably. Okay. So, for instance, individuals that have been bitten at the end of the finger, I can remember from all of our stuff. You don't go all the way around doing stuff. You do as much as you can. If you have H-rig left over, then you turn that into IM injections. Okay? So if you start somebody on the vaccine series, they've never been vaccinated before, and you start them on the series, and they're sitting in your office, and you only have the vaccine, you do not have the rig, you don't have the immune globulin. You can go ahead and give them a dose of vaccine then, but then they must get the rig by day 7. So you can do dose 0, dose 3. On day 7, then they're only going to get vaccine. Because at that point, the body's response to the vaccine might be blunted by the H-rig, so then they say just exclude it. Okay? So that is the only limitation or window period for giving the HRIG for anybody is if you've already started vaccine, then you have to do it within 7 days with the RIG. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
You sounded like you contradicted yourself to me. If we give the vaccine on day 0, we have 7 days to give the immune globulin, correct?
Yes.
All right. Just want to clarify that.
Counting with 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm a South Carolina public school kid, but that's where they taught me how to count.
Sweet. I have problems with the 0, and explaining it to patients, I have to include the 0. So, yes, dear.
You said that, like we could do the HRE up to 2 months if they had been bit 2 months ago.
Yep, yep.
But now, if the animal that bit them is still living, and you said like if it's 10 days and that animal's still living, there's no sense in doing it.
Right. Right. No, you're perfect. You're perfect. So, and just for the folks, because that's a good illustration, they're recording all of this. So, I said that you could, 2 months after an exposure, you could go ahead and initiate treatment for somebody, including the HRIG and the vaccine, and do the whole series. But if the animal that bit them 2 months later is still alive and healthy and doing okay, then your story has changed. So it becomes a very low risk story, and it doesn't make sense to vaccinate them. So that would be
I just
contraindicated.
want to make sure I got that.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And thanks for calling me out if you hear me contradicting myself. Keep me straight.
Does it depend on the animal?
Domestic dogs, domestic cats, you can do 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah. We've only got studies for domestic dogs, domestic cats, and ferrets. I don't know of a lot of folks anymore that have ferrets. You may hear it more than I do. Oh, we got a ferret owner. For wild animals, doesn't matter. There's no window for wild animals. Okay, so for our quizzes and our thingies that don't work anymore and is really hard to read, might be easier on your handout. You've got a healthy guy, 30 years old, bitten by a raccoon when he was emptying a garbage dumpster. He's never been vaccinated against rabies. So what would be his PEP series? I heard a couple D's. D. I love it. Yes, D. So 4 doses of rabies vaccine because he's healthy. And those are going to be on days 0, 3, 7, and 14. And then 1 dose of RIG on day 0. Perfect. It's another one. And this is another one of those tricky true-false thingies. Which of the following about rabies immune globulin is true? And I'll do better if I don't read them out loud. I heard C. C. Going. What's everybody think? C? Okay. Yep. Perfect. C is true. The issue with B is you splitting it 50-50. You want to get as much of the RIG into the site as possible. So if that's more, if that's less, whatever is anatomically appropriate. Got another one. If a previously unvaccinated adult was bitten in the left arm and receives RIG in accordance with Advisory Committee on ACIP guidelines, where should his or her day 0 dose of vaccine be injected? I heard A's and I heard B's. We're going with A. Yep. So always deltoid for vaccine, right? Always. For an adult, and he got his RIG in the left arm, so we go as far away as we can from the RIG, which would be the right deltoid. Okay? Cool? Okay, cool. Healthy woman, 45 years old, was bitten 3 days ago by a stray cat. There's your stinking cat. While visiting China. 6 months ago, she got her full course of rabies pre-exposure vaccination. Which of the following best describes correct rabies PEP for this patient? I hear a bunch of D's. So yes, D. Yes, ma'am, and a question.
What do you consider a non-healthy person?
Immunocompromised.
Somebody HIV?
Typically HIV, significant cancers, anything that's significant immune modulators. So diabetes, no. Unless your provider looks at him and goes, yeah, we're going to go ahead and cover it. The OB docs that work in Columbia will say that pregnant women, pregnancy counts as immunocompromised, and so they will recommend 5 doses for pregnant women. I've not seen that in any of the MMWR stuff. So it's another one. A man, 27 years old, awoke to find a bat in his bed this morning. He informs you he's HIV positive. Which of the following best describes correct rabies PEP for this patient? They're little tiny. See, I heard some C's. So HIV positive. So this one's actually going to be B. So all of our healthy folks get the 4 doses. Right. So if they're immune compromised, they get the 5 doses plus their rig. So you add on that 28th day dose. And just because I get some questions on serologic testing every once in a while, it is possible to send specimens to 2 different private labs within the state, or not within the state, within the country, to get serologic testing, to get titers for rabies. Not highly recommended. The only times that I have recommended them is when somebody initiates vaccination in another country and they're coming back and going, I don't know what type they used, et cetera, et cetera. For us, primarily what you're going to see is if somebody's immunocompromised or has some other significant issues of that nature. But in general, the story goes, even with your veterinarians who are working with animals all the time, if they've got an appropriate titer, but they're bitten by an animal that's found out to have rabies, they will still get boosters. So just because they've got an appropriate titer does not exclude them from getting post-exposure prophylaxis if they have a significant exposure. Does that kind of make sense? So fortunately, you guys aren't doing a whole lot of that, and that's okay. But just because it comes up sometimes. And because it's one of the quiz questions. So which of the following patients would most merit post-vaccination serologic testing to verify an adequate immune response after PEP? In really tiny little letters. A, yes sir. So immunocompromised patient. Pretty straightforward, right? Cool, okay. And then this obviously is getting towards the end here. Which of the following is a key component of rabies PEP in addition to rig and rabies vaccine? Yes, sir. C for wound cleansing. I chuckled at the local anesthesia. I'm sure some of them would prefer that. So, to get your 1 hour of credit, again, DHEC is not a CME provider, unfortunately, but you can get 1 hour of either CME or CNE. If you go to this particular little website, you got to do a sign up, use one of your emails, and then do a search and register. You can simply take the quiz, which all of these questions will look really familiar. You hit submit, it will grade it right then, tell you pass, and then we'll give you a certificate right then. So then it's 1 hour of approved hours, and that's a freebie. You just had the torture of sitting and listening to me. So, got some references on there, and then all sorts of lovely phone numbers. I think in your packet I did put my information on there, but then you can also call the other phone numbers that were in here and get a hold of me, and Sherry knows how to get me. So, questions? This is only going off of what the docs in Columbia have told me. So some of our CME folks is if you've got a pregnant woman, they count as immunocompromised. So consider doing the full 5 course. And that was for pregnant women. Any other questions? Okay. So really the biggest thing is figure out the story, right? High risk, low risk, and then go from there. But I'm always around and available if I can answer any questions for you.